Okay. Next topic is about Mexican schools. It's about the segregation and the fights against segregation of Mexican Americans in the United States. So what people refer to as Mexican schools, they were at their height from the 1920s to the 1940s. They were throughout the US Southwest. And this was primarily Mexican American children who were treated as if they had mental retardation, or there's got to be a better word for that. My apologies. They would be punished for speaking Spanish. And one of the justifications was that they were, this idea that they were, that they would bring diseases to the Anglo-American children, that they would spread those diseases to them. And so then it was important to segregate them. So yeah, they were seen as being dirty, as having lice, as having diseases that they could spread to Anglo-American children. I meant to explain this term ethnic Mexican. So ethnic Mexican is a term that I use to refer to both Mexican citizens and people of Mexican descent. And so if I say ethnic Mexican, it means I'm kind of lumping them together. Mexican citizens, people born in Mexico, and people born in the US of Mexican descent. And that's why I have Mexican schools kind of in quotes, is because people call them Mexican schools, but it was majority Mexican Americans, not Mexican citizens. I'll introduce you to a couple of important incidents. Both of them are in Southern California. First is Lemon Grove, which is in San Diego County. That's the county that borders with the US-Mexico border in Southern California. And there was an incident there in 1931. The incident is when the school district in Lemon Grove decided to create a new quote unquote Mexican school. They converted a barn into this Mexican school. And they claimed that they did this to meet their needs and because of location, meaning they're saying, okay, well, if they don't know English, then it makes sense to separate them so that they can learn English. And they also did them the favor of building this Mexican school on the Mexican side of town, because, they were segregated in terms of where people could live. And so we'll just put this on their side of town. But part of the evidence that was used to demonstrate that they weren't really doing it for those reasons, when they sued them, they pointed out that some of the students sent to the quote unquote Mexican school didn't speak Spanish. And they also pointed out that some of the children sent to the Mexican school were sent there even if they happened to not live on the Mexican side of town and had to cross a dangerous highway to get there. So there was this court case in 1931 named after one of the children, Roberto Alvarez and others, against the Board of Trustees of Lemon Grove School District. And so, yeah, it's interesting because on the one hand, this became the nation's first successful desegregation case. But on the other hand, not for the reasons we hope this would win. The school was eliminated because ethnic Mexicans were legally white. And so I'll explain that. And this, desegregation only applied to San Diego County, not to the whole state or the whole country. All right, so beginning with why were they legally white? If you recall, at the end of the Mexican-American War in 1848, Mexican citizens who stayed in the Southwest, if they stayed longer than a year, they automatically became US citizens. This was before the end of slavery. And so this meant that it was assumed that this meant that Mexican citizens, Mexican people, were legally white. Because at that time there was a presumption that you were white in order to become a US citizen. And so, yeah, and there's a lot of that still today. Of Mexican people, Mexican people can be of any race, but kind of the presumption of at least legally being white. And so this also meant that the state of California allowed for the segregation, had laws in place that allowed for the segregation of Native American, Asian, and Black children. So Native American, Asian, and Black, yes. And so since ethnic Mexicans were legally white, then those laws of the state of California didn't apply to them, is basically the argument. I'll show you a couple video clips about this.
Counsel, I understand that if you children separated, if they require special instruction in order to improve their education. But to separate as a group, all pupils of Mexican parentage, that can only be done by infringing on the laws of the state of California. These Mexican students are of the Caucasian race. Therefore, they are excluded from those state laws which allow the segregation of Negro, Oriental, and Indian children. Now, I don't blame the Mexican children for this segregation, just because a few of them happen to be behind in their schoolwork. On the contrary, that's an argument in their favor. I believe that this separation denies Mexican children of the daily presence of American children, which itself is so necessary for their learning of English. I find, therefore, that the Lemon Grove School Board is without the power to establish and maintain a separate school solely for pupils of Mexican heritage. Such an action violates the rights of these students. The school board is therefore ordered to immediately admit the petitioner, Roberto Alvarez, and all 74 Mexican students back into the regular school building, where they are to receive instruction on an equal basis with all other students. So, don't start yelling, don't start.
So this is Roberto Alvarez.
Go to class and do the best you can.
Well, they were happy. Yeah. They were happy because their children, had just as much right here as anybody else.
So all these people were children
It made me feel good, too,
at that school.
Get that done. Make this February,
But I think that in general, the American community, they didn't mind the decision in the least. I think they might have, some of them might even welcome it. But I think there was a few diehards that they couldn't, they can let go, and they have to be on a board, a school board, and Andy Anderson, Chabilsky, they were if there was a chamber of commerce of any kind, I'm sure they were all leaders in it, and I think they were the ones that were really responsible for trying to kick us out or trying to segregate us.
Well, counsel.
All right, so that's the Lemon Grove incident in 1931. Nation's first successful desegregation case, although not for the reasons we would hope that be. Next example case is Mendez v. Westminster in 1946, also in Southern California. This case in Orange County, it's like San Diego County is in the south, Orange County just north of that, and then it's Los Angeles, just to give you a sense of the geography there. All right, so how did this case come to be? There was a child named Sylvia Mendez. Here she is. One of her parents was Puerto Rican, one of her parents was Mexican. They moved to Westminster, and they sent Sylvia with her cousins and her aunt to go to school. Now, her cousins were light-skinned and therefore weren't sent to the quote-unquote Mexican school. But when her aunt tried to sign up Sylvia Mendez for the school, same school her cousins were going to, they told her that she couldn't. She had to go to the quote unquote Mexican school, essentially because she was darker. So Sylvia Mendez's parents and other parents sued Westminster School District in 1946, and they won this case. This was at the state level, and this ended up having the effect of ending segregation for Mexican children in the state of California, yeah. But again, it was based on them being white. Nevertheless, the NAACP was involved in this case, and they were able to use aspects of this case as legal precedent to argue and win Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. We'll talk later about Brown v. Board of Education and the meaning of this expression, with all deliberate speed. I'll play for you a short video of an interview with an author who wrote a book about this.
Hi, I'm John Molesky. Host of Dialogue, joining you from the set of Dialogue here at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, where I've just conducted an interview with our guest, Philippa Strong. Philippa is the author of this book, Mendez v. Westminster, School Desegregation and Mexican-American Rights, writing about a very important court case that is not as widely known as some others. We were just talking about reasons for that. Maybe one because it never made it to the Supreme Court, decided at a lower level. But tell us why you decided to immerse yourself in this case and write the book.
Simply because it was unknown, simply because Mendez versus Westminster is a really important part of American history that is unknown, as you said, in part because the case didn't go all the way to the Supreme Court, but I think in part because when we think of civil rights movement in the United States, we think of African Americans, who of course were the premier part of it. But we forget that other groups were out there fighting against discrimination and segregation. And Mendez versus Westminster is the key part of that fight. The part where Mexican-American parents told to send their kids to segregated schools, stood up and said, no,
think one of your viewers said that this case did more for Mexican Americans than Brown did for African Americans. That's significant?
That's significant. I don't know whether it's more exactly the same or whatever, but it's clearly very, very significant. And it helped activate the Mexican American community that began political organizing on a very big scale. It was really a crucial moment in not only Mexican American history, but American history.
And you mentioned its ties to Brown. One of those, NAACP, says that the brief that it filed in the Mendez case was.
The trial run for Brown versus Board of Education. Yes, that's when they first were able to say, not that you have to make the schools equal, which is what the NAA had been saying in court up to him, but that you have to integrate your schools.
What's the lesson learned when you look at this case and look at the current controversy over Latino immigrants, not necessarily only from Mexico, but as clearly the battleground of Arizona has become a focal point in this. What do you take away when you look back at lessons probably that we've already learned in history but tend to forget?
Well, partly that the fight never ends, that it seems to go on, and somehow we always manage to find yet another group to discriminate against.
So we'll talk about Arizona later.
Sylvia Mendez.
So this is Sylvia Mendez as a senior. Getting the Presidential Medal of Honor from President Obama.
Sylvia Mendez was thrust to the forefront of the civil rights movement when she was just a child. Denied entry to the Westminster School because of her Mexican heritage, she sought justice, and her subsequent legal case, Mendez versus Westminster, effectively ended segregation as a matter of law in California. The arguments in that case catalyzed the desegregation of our schools, prevailed in the landmark case, Brown versus Board of Education, forever changing our nation. Today, Sylvia Mendez continues to share her remarkable story and advocate for excellence and equality in classrooms across America.
We're not going to get into the 1950s right now. Don't want to get too far ahead.